Hi, I'm Roxy. This is a portrait that I painted to test out a brush set that I'm giving away on my Gumroad store. The brush pack is called Roxy's Essential Painting Brushes. As the name implies, these brushes are specifically for painting. I do have free drawing brushes on my Gumroad as well, but this pack is specifically for painting, and before I go live with it, I wanted to make sure that each brush in the pack was really useful. You often get those brush packs that have hundreds of brushes, but you only end up using one or two, and I didn't want that to be the case. So I think I've achieved something truly utilitarian. I used only brushes from this brush pack to paint this whole thing. So I want to take you through each one and show you how I use it, and also how you can customize them so that they're more comfortable for you. Before I get into the individual brushes, I just want to point out that there are two files in the pack. One is for Corel Painter 2022, and there's a legacy pack for older versions. Now the difference between them is that in Corel Painter 2022 they introduced a different cover method called enhanced cover, and I'm fairly certain that that's not going to work on older versions. So the 22 pack, most of the brushes use enhanced cover, and the legacy pack I just set to legacy cover so that it will be backwards compatible. So this is the first one, RXY Rnd. And you'd think something like this would be, one of the first brushes you'd come across in Corel's plethora of brush packs, but I was never able to find a simple round brush that behaved well. So I made one. So this is a brush that I probably used for the majority of this painting, at least building it up with the simple round brush. I find it perfect for blocking in and building up a form. The opacity is pressure sensitive, so if you press softly, you're just going to get a little bit of paint, and if you press hard, then it's going to come through at full opacity. Now I've calibrated it to be quite sensitive, which will suit people like me who press lightly, but if you find that it's going opaque too quickly, just head on over to brush calibration, and where you see the pressure power, just increase that number. So if you set it to 3, for example, then you're going to have to press a little bit harder for the paint to start appearing on the canvas. The other thing that you can do is change the overall opacity. I've set it to 20% by default, but I often jiggle around with this as I'm painting. Sometimes I'll set it to 5% because I just want to get like just the hint of a color. Sometimes I need a flat color, so I'll set it to 100% or whatever. So you can do this on the fly. You just change it to whatever suits you, and then you just come over here and click Reset Tool, and it'll change it back to the default. Of course, if you make a change and you like what you've done and it works well for you and you want to keep that change, just come up over here to Brushes and click Save Variant. Choose the brush category that you want to save it into, give it a name and click Save, and then you'll have your brush on hand whenever you need it. And what I've showed you here with the opacity and the brush calibration, this applies to most of the brushes in the pack. Most of them use opacity, so do keep that in mind. If it isn't behaving exactly how you want it, just tweak it. So the next brush I want to show you is RXY Rnd Soft. This is the soft variant of the humble round brush. You can see that I've set the default opacity to 5%, and it is a bigger brush as well. This is because I often find that when I use this brush, I tend to want to lay down soft kind of glazes rather than sharp details. Next up are the erasers. I have RXY Rnd Eraser and RXY Rnd Soft Eraser. They have the exact same settings as the two previous brushes, except that they're taking away rather than applying paint, obviously. So you can see it's the RXY Rnd Eraser set to 20% as well. So you're going to be slowly chipping away at the color rather than just straight up erasing, the same as you were building up the color with the RXY Rnd brush. So if you do need more aggressive erasing, just increase the opacity. And of course the soft eraser is just kind of going to softly deglaze something. It's also only 5%. So if you want it more aggressive, again, just increase the opacity. And these are the only dedicated erasers in this pack. I feel like if you have a sharp and a fuzzy eraser, you don't really need any other variants. These two erasers just do the trick for me. After that, we have another matching pair, and these are blender brushes, dedicated blenders. They don't apply any paint, they just blend. So the RXY Rnd Blender has the same settings as the RXY Rnd Brush, and all it's going to do is blend the paint that's already on the canvas. The soft blender will do the same, but it's just going to be doing it in a more fuzzy kind of way. So I find that the fuzzier one is good for a more digital look, whereas in fact all three of these brushes, RXY Rnd, RXY Rnd Eraser and RXY Rnd Blender, all of these are better for a more painterly look, and the soft eraser and the soft blender are better for like a more digital look. And if you really want to go painterly, then we move on to square brushes. Square brushes are superb for producing a more painterly look. So if you find your brushwork is boring or a little too digital looking, try a square brush. The first one, I call it RXY Sqr Soft. It's kind of got a soft edge to it. And then the next one I've got RXY Sqr Sharp, and as you can see, it's a lot sharper, and it kind of just gives a more angular look. So depending on the kind of look that you want in the end, you'd choose the appropriate brush. The third square brush is a little different. This is a hybrid brush actually. It's part blender and part normal brush. So what happens is if you press hard, let me just choose something that we can see. So if you press hard, it's going to paint. But if you press soft, it will just blend whatever is already on the canvas. And so what I like to use this brush for is I like to slap down a bunch of colors, and then I use it to create like abstract backgrounds. It's very quick to do that because you know, you can paint and blend and paint and blend without even really lifting your hand from the canvas. As you can see, it gives a nice painterly look. So abstract backgrounds, stuff that you want to just give the impression of without too much detail, this is a great brush for that. Next up is RXY Streak Multi. In my drawing packs, I do have quite a few brushes that make multiple strokes. As you can imagine, it's really good for hatching. But it's also useful in painting. for things like hair and grass, things like that. So I used this brush for almost all of the hair on Sad Santa over here. So I just used it as a base. So kind of did this kind of thing. But you'll notice that it starts to look a little almost like you can recognize the pattern if that's all you do. So what you really need to do is take a brush that's similar but only has one single streak and then paint over that so that you can vary it up a little bit. And that's what this brush is for, Roxy Streak Dry Out. It's the same kind of thing, the same kind of look. The difference with this brush, it's a little unusual, but it runs out of paint. So you can see I'm continuing to press, but no more paint's happening there. And how I did that, and I'll tell you why I did that as well, but how I did that is in the blending panel, I ticked dry out to transparency and I set the amount. So for example, you can change it, and well, that's almost nothing, but or you can make it a bit longer. See, eventually it runs out. So why I like to do this is you have better control over that tapered edge if you set it to dry out. So for example, if you're doing like whiskers on a cat and you want them all to be, oh geez, hang on, more like that. Okay, you got whiskers on a cat. Let's say this guy was a cat and you wanted to do whiskers. You didn't have to kind of have that hand control of ending the stroke exactly where you want it, because it does it for you. It runs out of ink. So this is something else that you can adjust on the fly. And of course you can just untick and then you'll never run out of ink. So really just as you please. And then of course remember you can just click reset and it resets it to default. The next couple of brushes are a little more expressive. Roxy Dry Brush, it kind of has, you can't really see it at this size, let me just zoom in. You see it's got like a little bit of a streak going on. And the next one is Roxy Noisy. This is more dots than streaks. So these two brushes, you can introduce a little bit of texture to the canvas, a little bit of expression in your strokes. Then I've got Dotty Scrapes. This is a particle brush I created. As you can see, I used it here. I used it for his fine wrinkles. But it's quite a versatile brush. As you can imagine, if you kind of do this type of thing, it could look like waves. You can even wave it a little bit more choppy water. It's also fantastic as a rain brush. If you set the opacity a little bit lower, so you can see the possibilities. The other thing that you can do is if you swirl it around, you can make like sparkly things, like maybe it could be useful for fireworks or some kind of particle system, flares and things like that. Okay, then I've got Roxy Paint Roller. This kind of simulates a paint roller when it doesn't really have enough paint on it, so it gets that kind of streaky look. I find it quite attractive. I like it for blocking in especially hard surface objects. Gives a nice painterly effect. Also nice for painting things like rocks. It's just super nice to play around with. It feels so smooth and gives this really angular, expressive look. Then I've got Roxy Whispy Brush. There's also a couple of things that you could use this brush for, like maybe some flames. Or another good use is you could do some clouds. Smoke effects even. Quite versatile. Anything wispy and vapory works well. Then we've got Roxy Cracked Grunge. I originally created this as a bark brush, but I find it's just quite nice for adding a bit of texture, and I've used it quite extensively on the skin just to kind of give a little bit more of a rough look. I mean, he's not a supermodel who uses cream every day, you know what I mean? So anytime you want to roughen something up, that's a good brush for it. And finally, I have an airbrush. I feel like every essential painting brush pack needs at least one airbrush, and this one, what I've done is I've made it behave like a spray can. So if you hold your stylus straight up, I mean, assuming that your tablet supports tilt, it's going to create a round splatter. If you tilt it to the side, you'll see that it sprays off to the one side, and the harder you press, the smaller the spray becomes, almost like as if you're holding a spray can. See that? So this is light. Let me actually change the color of this so you can see nicely. So that's light, and then I go hard, and it gets that spray painty look. So that's it. So as I said, this painting, I've only used the brushes that are in this brush pack, so you can see an example of what is possible. And you can find the link to download the brush pack in the description of this video. Hope you enjoy it. If you make something really cool with these brushes, I'd love to see it, just for kicks. Thank you for watching, and until the next one, God bless.